I yield.
Gentleman yields back.
Mr. Chairman,
For what purpose does the gentlelady seek
I
recognition?
have a unanimous consent request to enter the following statements into the record. Organizational statements from the Center for Gender and Refugee Studies, Church World Service, and National Immigration Forum.
Without objection.
Thank you.
Chair now recognizes Mr. Roy of Texas.
I thank the chairman. Mr. Scott, we were just told that we're unable to get workers into this country. True or false, we get somewhere around 1 million green cards every year, and we have seasonal workers that are able to come here and work under our current system under the law.
That's correct.
And currently at our border, what do we have right now in terms of our ability for Border Patrol to stop the flow between ports of entry, or is it in fact that Border Patrol is processing people at the ports of entry?
The Border Patrol stays outside the ports of entry themselves, but the Border Patrol is literally, it's almost acting as a port because they're processing getaways and they're leaving hundreds of miles of border wide open.
For example, at a tent like in Eagle Pass, right, where you've got a 10-acre facility where you're processing 1,500 people a day. Is Border Patrol a part of that operation?
Yes, sir. Yes.
As opposed to actually being on the line and being able to go patrol the border between the ports of entry as they're supposed to do.
Correct. And there's been some numbers reported, but I think what's important is even if half of the Border Patrol agents are deployed to the field at the beginning of shift, within an hour or so, they're overwhelmed with thousands of more illegal aliens, and then they are processing as well, leaving the border wide open.
Chief Scott, do we know how much fentanyl or dangerous narcotics come in between our ports of entry or dangerous individuals?
We have no idea, but there's no shortage in Chicago or New York.
Right. So this claim by my colleagues on the other side of the aisle that all of the fentanyl comes in at the ports of entry, we literally don't know how much is coming in between the ports of entry because Border Patrol is unable to do its job while it's being overwhelmed by the failed policies of this administration. Is that true?
That is accurate. And if you look at the statistics, anytime illegal immigration across the border between the ports slows down, drug seizures actually increase because agents are actually out there identifying it.
Supervisor Kenny, your community has been dramatically impacted, right, by the number of individuals that have been dumped into your community. Can you quickly, because it's just a matter of time, explain how much that has negatively impacted your community?
I'm from Orangetown in Rockland County. We actually obtained a restraining order to prevent them from coming until it goes through the court system. The county just north of us has received hundreds and hundreds at this point, and I can't speak for them.
And you have had hotels filled up with often single males that are filling up places so that needy individuals aren't able to get facilities and aren't able to get the resources they need. Is that true?
Yeah, the goal of Mayor Adams was to send 340 single adult men to a hotel in my town. It's been put on hold by the courts.
And where is your town again?
In Orangetown, which is 30 miles north of New York City.
Okay, so not on the southern border of the United States.
No.
And so this is something we're dealing with, as my friend from Arizona, Mr. Biggs, knows, and my friend from California, Mr. McClintock, and others know on the border. We deal with it all the time in our communities in South Texas, but this is something that the entire country is now dealing with. And I'd like to now move to Ms. Nobles, and I cannot possibly put into words, Ms. Nobles, what you have experienced as a result of the failed policies of this country. I would simply ask, as carefully as I can, having met with numerous family members who have lost loved ones due to these failed policies, whether it's through violence, as you have unfortunately experienced, or whether it is through, for example, fentanyl poisonings that so many of our moms have experienced. I met with 3 fentanyl moms just 2 weeks ago in Austin, Texas. I've met with dozens. I've met with dozens of individuals who've lost loved ones, including a family member in San Antonio whose son was killed by an illegal immigrant who had been here, had been arrested, let go, arrested, let go, and then burned this woman's son to death. That's what we have going on in our country, while our colleagues on the other side of the aisle bury their head in the sand and pretend that somehow it's compassionate. I would just ask you, Ms. Nobles, to explain whether or not you've had interactions with other moms and family members who have had similar unfortunate experiences as a result of our failed policies.
Unfortunately, I haven't. I haven't seen anybody talk about their story or shared anything about, if it, because I know Kayla wasn't the only one, but where are they? So that's why I'm standing up and talking about her story and getting her story out. At least I can speak for my child and make sure that I make people aware of what's going on.
Well, Ms. Nobles, I'm going to, after this hearing, connect you with Angel families who have had a number of these experiences that they've put out, with the Vargas family in San Antonio who have been dealing with loss from these kinds of policies. And I would just ask Chief Scott, are the current policies stopping the kind of violence that can occur through having, for example, in this case, a UAC, an unaccompanied alien child, who ended up carrying out this crime that Ms. Nobles had to suffer from. I want to ask you that question, but I also just want to point out, and before you answer the question, and then I'll yield back, I just came back from the federal district courthouse because I went over there to support Jaime Zapata's family, because Jaime Zapata was gunned down by the cartels in 2011, and the sentencing is going on right now as we speak. Cartels are empowered at our border. They're empowered by China. They're empowered by our own federal government failing to do its job, and Americans are dying as a result, and so are migrants. Mr. Scott, if you can answer that question, and then I'll yield back.
The current crisis is making it impossible to be able to weed out the criminals, especially the UACs, from anyone else. The agents don't have time to do face-to-face interviews. There's no global database of criminal records.
Thank you, Chief Scott.
Mr. Chairman, I seek unanimous consent on various articles to put a piece from the New York Times dated April 23rd, Biden opens a new back door on immigration. The Navajo Nation requesting answers to questions. Border crossings down. This is Washington Post article from May 19th. Border crossings down, but many migrants released to U.S. to ease crowding. Breitbart piece entitled Human Smuggler Drops Preschool-Aged Child Over California Border Wall, dated today's date, as well as a piece dated today, Georgia Democrat slams party for favoring migrants over Americans.
Without objection,
Thank you.
Chair now recognizes Ms. Jackson Lee of Texas.
Chairman, and to the ranking member, as one would expect, Ms. Nobles, and I'm over here. Ms. Nobles, I'm in this direction.
Oh.
I don't. As a mother, I couldn't say anything less than the pain that I know that you're experiencing. I could say my heart goes out to you, but I want to acknowledge the pain for any mother, any family to lose their precious child. I want your daughter's story to be heard. And if we can work in a bipartisan way, I will sign on to any bill that enhances her heroic story. I think that's what you are surviving on. What a young woman, wanting to be independent, working 2 jobs, holding her head up high. A vicious act. Forgive me if I say this is not solely immigration, poor police work, to be honest with you. But frankly, we wanted that not to happen. And no one on this panel is champion MS-13. I can tell you that. And so we've got to find a way to decipher, discern, to weed out. Because if there is a mother trying to come with just to work in the fields, I know that that may not be the best way for her to come, but that is not the MS-13. They don't deserve to be in this country, period. So let me just, I don't want to say thank you because you're here in pain, but just want you to know I think her story has to be told. Thank you for your presence here today. Chief, I assume we served overlapping. I'm not sure. What years were you? You're retired, so what years have you served, sir?
As the chief, it was February 2020 until August of 2021, but I was Border Patrol agent for over 29 years.
Okay, starting what year?
1992.
Yeah. So you've had several leaders, presidents, and then, of course, Homeland Security came into being after 9/11. I was on the committee in its origins and know just about every one of your Border Patrol leaders. Would you say that it would be better to approach immigration reform, Republicans and Democrats, in a terminology that we've coined under the late John McCain, comprehensive immigration reform, which in essence deals with border security on the north and the south, and recognizing legal pathways for entry? Would you accept that would be a better approach?
I believe border security is exactly like your home. It gets overcomplicated a lot of times in the public discussion, but it's exactly like your home. We just need people to come through the front door in a legal manner. Congress gets to pick who those people are, not the Border Patrol.
So my time is short. I want you to answer the question specifically. Comprehensive immigration reform with border security and legal pathways. Would you accept that?
Based on my experience, the border security has to come first.
Well, let me, I can't put words in your mouth, but you're not going to get border security coming first. You need to be able to balance it. You would not accept a border security and recognizing pathways to legal entry?
Based on my experience and looking at 86 IRA, you have to be able to secure the border first, or all the other conversations are irrelevant.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think reasonably, Mr. Hatfield, as you understand, when John McCain, the late John McCain, we had a very strong comprehensive bill. And it had border security and the legal pathway. If we get stuck on border security, we're not listening to the witnesses here. We're not listening to the New York town that is frustrated with what's happening to them, rightly so. So let me just get you to just espouse, because my time is going. First of all, your organization was affiliated with the Tree of Life, was it not? Or the attitude of that killer?
Yeah, I'd rather not discuss the Tree of Life because the prosecution is ongoing at this point.
Well, let me just say, since I went there, let me just say that the attitude was that Jews were bringing in migrants and immigrants. Is that true?
That is correct.
And it resulted in death, did it not?
That is correct.
All right, let me just get to the point of the work that you do, and that is, if things change in the hemisphere so that more refugees are coming and you work with refugees to help the United States so they don't result in being lost or being in the wrong direction. And as well, I would assume that you abhor MS-13 as well. If you can answer those two questions, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely and absolutely.
You got to say...
Yes. HIAS is entirely focused on legal pathways to bring people into the United States so they do not resort to fleeing across borders to seek asylum. We try to provide them with safe and legal alternatives to that, and in partnership with the U.S. government and Jewish communities. And absolutely, we need a system of control which can identify, vet, and detain and remove people who are a danger to the society.
The gentlelady's time
Like
is expired.
MS-13.
Yes.
Chair
Yes.
recognizes
I yield
Mr.
back.
Moore of Alabama.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Certainly want to thank all the witnesses for being here today. You know, I've said this before and I'll say it again, that a closed border, a controlled border is actually a compassionate border. And not just for the migrants who get turned in to indentured servants or worse, but for the Americans that some of these illegal aliens harm. For example, in my district, the 2nd Congressional District of Alabama, a couple weeks ago, Talga County Sheriff Department arrested Gravy Zavala, a 29-year-old illegal alien from Honduras, for the rape of a teenage girl in Prattville. It's alleged that he drug her into a bathroom in a restaurant. Press reports indicate that he entered the United States in November 2021 through Texas using a fake name, but was allowed to enter into this country. In addition, according to the press reports, he had a criminal record in Honduras. I don't know how this is possibly acceptable. And Ms. Nobles, unfortunately, you and your family know this all too well. And I am terribly sorry for what happened to you and your daughter. I'm a proud father of 4. I got 2 girls and a granddaughter that'll be born probably by Friday, I understand. That's what the experts are saying. Anyway, we should never let this happen. And so, Mr. Hetfield, I want to kind of go to you initially. You said we got a lot of people coming to this country that are not qualified. What do you mean by that?
The only way for many people to come into this country is through the asylum system. That's the only way to be able to not be expeditiously removed at the border, is to claim a fear. So of course people are using that pathway if they're coming here for reasons that do not qualify them for asylum, such as they need to support themselves, they're trying to escape poverty, they're trying to reunite with family, which is why we need to have an asylum system that functions and efficiently determines whether or not somebody has a legitimate asylum claim or not.
Good. Mr. Hetfield, let me ask you this. I was in Yuma, Arizona. This is our 3rd hearing. We had one in the district in Yuma, or actually on the border. And the sheriffs informed us there that basically the border agents have become concierge. They're just giving these people motion to appear, an $800 taxpayer-funded subsidy and a cell phone. And then when we take their calls for court dates, they'll take our phones, but they're not taking our calls. Do you find that alarming that we're just turning people loose with very little background checks?
I find it very alarming that people are getting lost in the system waiting for years to get an asylum hearing. That doesn't work for anybody.
Speaking of lost in the system, we heard a few weeks ago that we had lost 85,000 unaccompanied minors. The federal government had shipped them to Google addresses in America, and now it sounds like, based on testimony, they're not all minors, and they're actually, some of them here are doing a great deal of harm. Mr. Scott, I want to ask you a question real quick. I heard prices people had on their heads for coming to this country just south of the border. Last time I heard it was about $6,000 or $7,000 coming out of Mexico. Further south, Triangle Nations, about $9,000 or $10,000. And then Syria was $20,000. Russians were paying $19,000, and Chinese nationals were paying $80,000. Where is that money going, you think, Mr. Scott?
Goes directly to fuel the cartels.
It fuels the cartel. And what happens if somebody doesn't have the money? Do they actually become indentured servants or slaves? Is that what happens?
So that is one of the many things that could happen. The prices vary depending on how much risk you're willing to take, how far out in the desert you'll go, so they vary. But the price also varies if you're willing to do other things. So if you're willing to guide, or you're willing to smuggle narcotics, or you're
I heard that's interesting, Mr. Scott. I appreciate you mentioning that they actually, if you'll backpack that heroin or cocaine or fentanyl, your passage is somewhat considered paid if you're willing to be a drug mule rather than a slave. Is that correct?
That is how some people cross, yes.
Ms. Nobles, have you heard anything from the Biden administration concerning the loss of your daughter?
No, I haven't.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, with that, I'm going to yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does Ms. Jackson Lee seek recognition?
I'd like to ask unanimous consent that I can submit into the record article Biden administration to send 1,500 troops to the southern border for support. Rolls ahead of expected migrant, and also to have a statement that reflects that the numbers have gone down as it relates to those entering the United States at this time. Ask unanimous consent.
Without objection, and the chair recognizes Ms. Ross.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of the witnesses, and in particular to Mrs. Nobles for sharing your story. And please know that I join with my colleagues in wanting justice for her and for other people who have similarly lost their lives through senseless acts. And please know we're with you. Earlier this spring, and the ranking member may have brought this up in her opening comments, we traveled to McAllen and Brownsville, Texas, two Texas border towns. Our conversations with U.S. Custom and Border Protection during that visit reinforced my commitment to ensuring that CBP has the resources that it needs to strengthen border control. Agents we spoke with specifically emphasized the need for sophisticated surveillance technology to monitor border crossings. They talked about how the cartels had more drones and kids on roofs who were operating the drones than the kinds of technology that we needed to see people before they got to the border and be able to stem that. And I see that Chief Scott is nodding as I talked about that. During our visit, I was also struck by the reliance of our immigration and asylum systems on nonprofits and local governments, that they were not getting the support from the federal government or the state governments to do their jobs. And what goes on in Brownsville, Texas, on the local government tax dollars is nothing short of extraordinary to make sure that people who have been allowed to cross the border can get on their way quickly and not be in Brownsville and not be in those hotels. They say they don't want people to stay overnight in Brownsville. They want to get people to the bus station. They want to get people to the airport. Now, while their work is admirable, this responsibility shouldn't fall solely on NGOs and local governments. State and federal governments need to bolster the resources dedicated to responding to this many people who enter the United States under asylum claims and through other legal pathways. And the federal government must fund the technology that CBP needs and the training and the personnel so that they can do their jobs. Immigration is an extremely complex issue, and Democrats are pushing for implementation of effective solutions to strengthen border security and expand legal pathways to enter this country. It is important that we expand legal pathways because we simply need the workers. And I represent North Carolina. I hear from the agriculture industry every day. I went to visit a small family farm 2 weeks ago. Number one issue, immigration. Hospitality industry, number one issue, immigration. Tech industry, number one issue, immigration. We need to do both. In fact, we need to make sure that our rhetoric doesn't make the immigration problems worse. And unfortunately, it's been documented that repeated right-wing claims about the border being completely open are used on social media by smugglers to encourage more people to attempt to come to the United States without authorization. We need to have that stopped. We need to put aside our partisan blinders and use these hearings not to magnify the problems of our immigration system, but to solve them in a bipartisan way. With the remaining minute I have, my first question is for Mr. Hetfield. Unlike many countries, ours does not have a reception system for asylum seekers after they've been initially processed by immigration officials at the border and allowed to come into our country. NGOs and local governments like Brownsville, Texas, are stepping in to fill the gap that the federal and state governments have left. And we simply need a more orderly process. I wish everybody could see how well Brownsville does its job. From your experience, how are these programs contributing to a safe and orderly immigration system, and what more can be done in 14 seconds?
They're absolutely essential. When I directed the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom's study on expedited removal a few years ago, we did find that when you provide that kind of counseling, you actually have a very high dissolve rate by asylum seekers because they realize that they're actually not eligible for the benefit, so they withdraw their claims. But by not having a reception system, you're just contributing to having people get lost in the system.
Thank you.